Alex Carter was just an ordinary 12-year-old boy, living an ordinary life in the small town of Maplewood. The kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where the biggest excitement was a school football game or a holiday parade. Alex loved it that way. He wasn't a troublemaker. He was the quiet kid who kept to himself, preferring the company of books and basketball. His friends were few but close, and his parents worked hard but were always there for him. Life was simple, predictable, and peaceful. Every morning, Alex would walk to school, listening to his favorite songs on his headphones, the world fading away as he lost himself in the music. His sneakers hit the pavement with a rhythmic thump, and he often found himself zoning out, thinking about what to have for lunch or the latest episode of his favorite TV show. The neighborhood was quiet, just rows of modest houses with well-kept lawns, and the sweet scent of fresh grass filled the air. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the street, signaling the start of another day. As Alex passed the old corner store on the way to school, he greeted Mr. Jensen, the store's owner, who always had a friendly smile for him. He liked the routine of it all, the predictability, the comfort. There were no surprises here, nothing that could shake the balance of his quiet world. But that morning, something was different. As Alex approached the alley behind the store, he noticed a figure darting out from the shadows. A man in a dark hoodie, clutching something in his hands. The man's pace was frantic, and his face was hidden, but Alex could see the fear in his movements. The man was running fast, almost as if he knew someone was chasing him. Alex froze in his tracks, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. For a moment, his heart raced, and he thought about turning back, but he didn't. He stood there watching the man as he disappeared into the street, disappearing from view. Little did Alex know, that fleeting moment, the sight of a stranger running with a bag in his hands, would change everything. What seemed like just another normal morning would soon spiral into a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and a fight for justice. Alex's life and everything he thought he knew about the world was about to be shattered. The rest of Alex's walk to school felt like a blur. His mind kept replaying the strange moment in the alley where the man in the hoodie had appeared out of nowhere. The image of his hurried steps and the bag clutched tightly in his hands kept replaying in Alex's mind. Was he just imagining things, or had he actually seen something suspicious? But Alex quickly shook the thought away. It was probably nothing. People ran all the time, right? Maybe he was just in a hurry, or maybe he had dropped something at the store. Alex had no reason to think it was anything more than a coincidence. Still, a feeling of unease hung in the air, and he couldn't quite shake the suspicion that something was wrong. At school, Alex tried to forget about the man. He grabbed his books from his locker and went to his first class, trying to focus on the math problems in front of him. But his mind kept drifting. He felt like someone was watching him, like he was somehow involved in something bigger than himself. As the bell rang to signal the start of second period, a sudden commotion outside the classroom door interrupted his thoughts. "Alex Carter?" a voice called from the hallway. It wasn't a voice he recognized. Alex turned in his seat, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. He had no idea what was going on, but he was certain something wasn't right. Before he could respond, two uniformed police officers stepped into the classroom. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Alex. The officers didn't even glance around. They were focused entirely on him. "Alex Carter," one officer repeated. "We need you to come with us." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. The students around him whispered and exchanged glances, but Alex couldn't make sense of what was happening. Why would the police want him? He hadn't done anything wrong. The officer's expression was unreadable as he extended his hand. "Wait, what's going on?" Alex asked, his voice shaking. "We'll explain at the station," the officer said, his tone cold and firm. Confused and scared, Alex slowly stood up. His mind raced. He wanted to shout that this was all a mistake, that he hadn't done anything wrong, but no one seemed to be listening to him. The officers escorted him out of the classroom, and the eyes of every student followed them. The whole school seemed to be watching, but no one said a word. Alex felt like he was in a nightmare, walking through the hallways of his own school as if he were a criminal. By the time they reached the police car, Alex felt like he was losing his grip on reality. Everything that had seemed normal just hours ago, his walk to school, the quiet streets, The friendly greetings felt distant, like it had all been swept away in an instant. As the car door slammed shut behind him, Alex's stomach twisted in fear. The last thing he remembered before the car drove off was his friends' faces, wide-eyed and confused, watching him disappear into the unknown. Alex's heart hammered in his chest as he sat in the cold, sterile waiting room of the courthouse. His hands were clammy, and he wiped them nervously on his jeans. It had been days since he was taken from school by the police, and every day felt like an endless nightmare. His parents had been frantic, trying to figure out what had happened. But the more they learned, the worse things seemed to get. The charges against Alex were serious. Accessory to robbery, despite the fact that Alex had never even touched the bag Danny had stolen. Now here he was, sitting in a courtroom with strangers staring at him. His mind raced as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. How had his life gone from playing basketball at the park to sitting in a courtroom accused of a crime he didn't commit? The room buzzed with whispers as Alex sat next to his lawyer, Mrs. Roberts, a woman who had been hired by his parents but didn't seem to care much about his case. She barely looked at him as she flipped through paperwork, her eyes glued to the clock as if counting down the minutes until this was over. "Don't worry, Alex," she muttered, barely glancing up. "I'll try my best, but don't expect miracles." Alex wanted to scream. How could she say that to him? He needed help, not empty promises. But instead, he sat quietly, his stomach twisting in knots. His mind kept returning to the one question he couldn't escape. Why was this happening to him? The doors of the courtroom swung open, and the judge entered. The room fell silent. As he took his seat at the bench, Alex caught a glimpse of his parents, who were sitting across the room, their faces full of worry. His mom gave him a small, reassuring smile, but it only made him feel worse. He could see the fear in her eyes. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. The prosecutor stood and started speaking, painting Alex as a criminal. He didn't care about the truth. He was only interested in securing a conviction. "The defendant was near the scene of the crime," the prosecutor said, his voice smooth and confident. "His presence alone makes him guilty." Alex wanted to stand up and shout, but he knew better. The words didn't seem to matter. Every time he tried to explain, it was like no one was listening. The courtroom felt like a stage, and Alex was the unlucky actor in the middle of a tragedy he didn't understand. As the trial continued, the whispers grew louder. His classmates were there too, sitting in the audience, some of them casting judgmental glances at him. Alex could hear their murmurs. "He did it! He's lying!" It felt like the walls were closing in. The more he tried to defend himself, the more the truth seemed to slip further away. It was then that Alex realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about clearing his name. This was about something bigger. He wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was fighting for his very identity, and the battle was only beginning. As the days passed, Alex's world grew darker. His courtroom appearances became longer and more exhausting, but his chances of proving his innocence seemed to get smaller with each passing moment. His lawyer, Mrs. Roberts, barely spoke to him outside of the hearings. His parents tried to stay hopeful, but even they were starting to doubt that things would ever be okay. Alex felt more like a prisoner than a person trying to clear his name. But amidst the overwhelming despair, there was one person who refused to give up, Mrs. Thompson, his old teacher. She had visited him at the police station when he was first arrested and had offered him words of encouragement. But it wasn't just her kindness that Alex appreciated. Mrs. Thompson believed in him. She knew he couldn't be guilty of the robbery. And as the trial continued, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than anyone was letting on. It was during one of her visits that she suggested they dig deeper. "There's something off about this case, Alex," she said one afternoon as they sat in the small, dimly lit room in the courthouse. "I'm not giving up on you, and neither should you. We need to look at the evidence more carefully." Together, they started going through the police reports and the store's security footage. The store had cameras that recorded the robbery, and Alex was sure the video would show him walking down the street far away from the scene. But when they watched the footage, Alex's stomach dropped. The thief, a man wearing a dark hoodie, was clearly running away from the store, clutching a bag. But there was something strange about the way he moved, something that felt familiar. Mrs. Thompson rewound the video several times, her eyes narrowing. "Look at the way he runs," she said. "I've seen this person before." Alex's heart raced. He knew exactly what she meant. He had seen that walk before. It was Danny, a former student from their school, who had been expelled last year for stealing from the cafeteria. The same Danny who had always acted strange and never quite fit in. Alex couldn't believe it. The whole time, he had been focusing on himself, on the way he'd been wrongly accused, when the real robber was someone he knew. Someone they all knew. But even with this revelation, Alex and Mrs. Thompson knew it wouldn't be enough to change anything right away. They had to present the evidence to the judge, and they feared he wouldn't believe them. Still, they had to try. The truth was out there, and they had to make sure everyone saw it. But with each step closer to uncovering the truth, the stakes grew higher. The closer they got to revealing the real thief, the more Alex feared what might happen next. Would anyone believe them? Would Danny come after them to stop them from speaking out? Alex didn't know, but one thing was clear: he couldn't back down now. As the days passed, Alex's world grew darker. His courtroom appearances became longer and more exhausting, but his chances of proving his innocence seemed to get smaller with each passing moment. His lawyer, Mrs. Roberts, barely spoke to him outside of the hearings. His parents tried to stay hopeful, but even they were starting to doubt that things would ever be okay. Alex felt more like a prisoner than a person trying to clear his name. But amidst the overwhelming despair, there was one person who refused to give up: Mrs. Thompson, his old teacher. She had visited him at the police station when he was first arrested and had offered him words of encouragement. But it wasn't just her kindness that Alex appreciated. Mrs. Thompson believed in him. She knew he couldn't be guilty of the robbery, and as the trial continued, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than anyone was letting on. It was during one of her visits that she suggested they dig deeper. "There's something off about this case, Alex," she said one afternoon as they sat in the small, dimly lit room in the courthouse. "I'm not giving up on you, and neither should you. We need to look at the evidence more carefully." Together, they started going through the police reports and the store's security footage. The store had cameras that recorded the robbery, and Alex was sure the video would show him walking down the street, far away from the scene. But when they watched the footage, Alex's stomach dropped. The thief, a man wearing a dark hoodie, was clearly running away from the store, clutching a bag. But there was something strange about the way he moved, something that felt familiar. Mrs. Thompson rewound the video several times, her eyes narrowing. "Look at the way he runs," she said. "I've seen this person before." Alex's heart raced. He knew exactly what she meant. He had seen that walk before. It was Danny, a former student from their school, who had been expelled last year for stealing from the cafeteria. The same Danny who had always acted strange and never quite fit in. Alex couldn't believe it. The whole time, he had been focusing on himself, on the way he'd been wrongly accused, when the real robber was someone he knew. Someone they all knew. But even with this revelation, Alex and Mrs. Thompson knew it wouldn't be enough to change anything right away. They had to present the evidence to the judge, and they feared he wouldn't believe them. Still, they had to try. The truth was out there, and they had to make sure everyone saw it. But with each step closer to uncovering the truth, the stakes grew higher. The closer they got to revealing the real thief, the more Alex feared what might happen next. Would anyone believe them? Would Danny come after them to stop them from speaking out? Alex didn't know, but one thing was clear: he couldn't back down now. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Alex couldn't process what he had just heard. Danny's confession echoed in his mind, but it didn't make sense. How could Danny lie about him for so long? Why would he point the finger at Alex in the first place? The question swirled in his head like a storm, and he felt dizzy, as though the floor beneath him had been yanked away. As the judge banged his gavel, the courtroom came to life again. Officers quickly moved to arrest Danny, their handcuffs clicking shut with an unsettling finality. But as they led him away, Alex's mind was still racing. This wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about understanding why Danny had done it in the first place. What kind of person would accuse someone else of a crime they themselves had committed? Mrs. Thompson leaned in and whispered to Alex, her voice steady but filled with concern. "It's over, Alex. You're going to be okay now." Alex didn't know how to feel. He was relieved that the truth had come out, but the weight of what had just happened still hung over him. His life had been turned upside down, and he wasn't sure how to pick up the pieces. As the courtroom cleared out, Alex found himself alone with his parents for the first time in days. His mother wrapped him in a tight hug, her tears soaking his shirt. "I knew you didn't do it, baby," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "I knew it all along." But even her words of comfort couldn't completely erase the fear Alex had felt throughout the whole ordeal. He had been accused of something horrible, and no amount of apologies from Danny or anyone else could take that away. His friends would never look at him the same way. He would never look at them the same way either. As they walked out of the courthouse, the bright sun seemed almost too bright. The world had continued turning, unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded inside those walls. But Alex felt different. He wasn't the same kid who had walked into the courthouse days ago. His trust in people had been shattered, his sense of security gone. "Where do we go from here?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His father put an arm around his shoulders, squeezing him gently. "We take it one step at a time. We rebuild. You're free now, Alex. That's all that matters." But even with his father's reassurance, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something had been lost in all of this. He had been wronged, and the damage went deeper than just the accusations. The truth had been revealed, yes, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. As they left the courthouse and stepped into the bustling street, Alex couldn't help but glance over his shoulder one last time at the building where everything had changed. The truth was out, but what would that really mean for his future? Could he ever go back to the life he had before? Or would everything be forever tainted by the events of the last few days? As the days passed, the feeling of relief Alex had briefly experienced after the trial began to fade. Even though Danny had confessed and his name was cleared, Alex couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The world around him seemed different now, more dangerous, more unpredictable. His life had been turned upside down, and the aftershocks were still rattling him. It was on a quiet afternoon, just a few days after the trial, when Alex's worst fears began to come true. He was walking home from school, taking the same route he always took, the one that led him through the small park at the edge of his neighborhood. It was a beautiful day, with the sun shining brightly and the air filled with the sounds of children playing in the distance. But instead of feeling at peace, Alex felt an uneasy tightness in his chest. He couldn't explain it, but something told him he wasn't alone. Turning a corner near the park, Alex's heart stopped as he saw a familiar figure standing by the playground, a figure he never thought he'd see again. Danny, his stomach twisted into knots. The last time Alex had seen Danny was in the courtroom, where Danny had admitted to the robbery and everything had seemed like it would be over. But now here he was, looking at Alex with an unreadable expression. His face was pale, and his hands were stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie. Alex took a cautious step forward. "Danny, what are you doing here?" Danny didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced around nervously, as if making sure no one else was watching. His eyes flicked back to Alex, and for the first time, Alex saw something strange in Danny's gaze. Fear. "You shouldn't be here," Danny finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you're getting into." Alex frowned, confusion spreading across his face. "What do you mean? You confessed. It's over. You're free. I'm free." Danny's eyes flickered with something darker. "No, you're not. You think everything's okay now, but it's not. You're in danger. They're not going to let this go." Alex's breath caught in his throat. "Who? Who's going to stop it?" Danny took a shaky step toward him, his face a mask of fear and regret. "You don't understand. I wasn't the only one involved in the robbery. There are people out there who don't want the truth to come out. And now that I've confessed, they're going to come after you." Alex felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about surviving. He had been caught in a web of lies and deceit, and now it seemed like the real danger was only just beginning. Danny's warning echoed in Alex's mind as he turned and fled. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get as far away from Danny and whatever trouble he was caught up in. But deep down, Alex knew that running wouldn't solve anything. He needed answers, and he needed to find out who was behind all of this before it was too late. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that Danny's warning wasn't just a wild accusation. The more he thought about it, the more everything started to make sense. Why had Danny suddenly confessed? Why had he looked so terrified? What had he been involved in that had caused him to turn on Alex in the first place? The pieces of the puzzle didn't quite fit, and Alex couldn't ignore the feeling that there was a bigger picture, one that was still hidden beneath the surface. The next day at school, Alex tried to keep his head down, hoping the worst was over. But as he sat in his last class of the day, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out cautiously, unsure of what to expect. The screen flashed with an anonymous message. "Stay away from Danny. He's not telling you everything. There are people watching you." Alex's stomach lurched. He quickly locked his phone and shoved it back into his pocket, trying to act like nothing had happened. But his mind was racing. Who could have sent this? How did they know what Danny had said? And why were they warning him now, when the trial was already over? Just as the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Alex's phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he recognized. Detective Mitchell, the officer who had questioned him during the investigation. "Alex, I need you to come to the station," the voice on the other end of the line said, sounding strained. "It's important. There's something we need to talk about." Alex's pulse quickened. The last time he had spoken to Detective Mitchell, the officer had been sympathetic, trying to help him through the mess. But now there was a sense of urgency in his tone that set off alarm bells in Alex's mind. Without a word, Alex grabbed his backpack and left the classroom, making his way toward the police station. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The warning Danny had given him, the strange messages, and now this unexpected call. It all pointed to something bigger. Someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, and Alex was caught right in the middle. When he arrived at the station, the air felt thick with tension. Detective Mitchell greeted him at the door, his face pale and tight. "Alex, I need to show you something," he said, leading him down a narrow hallway toward a small, dimly lit room. Inside, the detective flipped on a screen, revealing a series of surveillance photos. Alex's eyes widened as he saw the familiar faces of people he knew, teachers, classmates, and even a few community leaders. They were all photographed together, gathered in the same place. But what really made Alex's stomach turn was the figure in the middle of the group, Danny. "This is bigger than you think," Detective Mitchell said gravely. "Danny wasn't working alone. He was part of something much more dangerous. And now you're a part of it too." Alex's mind was racing. What had he gotten himself into? He had no idea how deep this conspiracy ran. But one thing was certain. His fight for justice wasn't over. It was just beginning. Alex felt his heart race as he stared at the screen. The images of familiar faces making his stomach churn. The people he had trusted, the ones he had known his whole life, were connected to something sinister. He had always thought of them as the pillars of the community. Teachers, local business owners, and even some family friends. But now as he looked at the photos, a cold realization settled over him. They weren't just ordinary people. They were part of a larger operation, one that had been hiding in plain sight. Detective Mitchell saw the confusion and fear on Alex's face. "I know this is a lot to take in, but you need to understand that you're not just a bystander anymore. You're a part of this," the detective said, his voice grave. "Danny got caught up in something much bigger than he could handle, and now they're trying to cover their tracks. They're willing to do anything to keep their secrets buried." Alex's mind was spinning. He wanted to ask so many questions, but the words wouldn't come. How could all these people be involved? And why had they let Danny take the fall for something they had done? There were so many unanswered questions, but one thing was certain. Alex's life had changed forever. The truth he had fought so hard for was now tangled in a web of lies and deceit, and he had no idea how to untangle it. "The robbery," Alex began, his voice trembling. "It was just a cover-up, wasn't it? Something to distract from whatever they were really doing." Detective Mitchell nodded slowly. "Exactly. The robbery wasn't the real crime. It was the perfect distraction. While everyone focused on you and Danny, they were busy covering up their real operations. But now that Danny's confession is out, they're scared. They'll do whatever it takes to keep you quiet. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He had thought the worst was behind him, but now it seemed like the real danger was just beginning. He was in over his head and he knew it. The people behind this conspiracy weren't going to let him walk away easily. "I don't know what to do," Alex whispered, his voice cracking. "I don't know who I can trust anymore." Detective Mitchell's eyes softened, but his expression remained serious. "You can trust me, and together, we're going to expose them. But it's going to be dangerous, Alex. You need to be ready." Alex nodded slowly, his mind already racing with the steps ahead. He had been through so much already, accused of a crime he didn't commit, then falsely blamed for something he hadn't done. Now it seemed like the true battle was just beginning, but this time Alex wasn't going to run. He had to see this through, no matter the cost. The truth needed to be exposed, and Alex was determined to be the one to do it. The weight of everything Alex had learned felt suffocating. He had always believed in the goodness of the people around him, but now his entire world seemed to be crumbling. The people he had trusted were involved in something much darker, and the threats against him were becoming more real with each passing moment. Detective Mitchell had been clear. If Alex was going to help bring this to light, he would have to confront those responsible. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be safe. But Alex had no choice. The truth had to be exposed, no matter the cost. It was late that evening when the plan was set into motion. Alex met with Mitchell in the small, dimly lit office at the police station. His palms were sweaty, his mind racing with anxiety. He had no idea what to expect when they confronted the people behind the conspiracy. But he knew it had to be done. There was no turning back now. "We have to go straight to the top," Mitchell said, his voice low. "The people in these photos, your so-called friends, they're just pawns. The real mastermind is someone much more powerful, someone who's been pulling the strings from the beginning." Alex nodded grimly. He could feel the adrenaline surging through him, but it was mixed with fear. Fear of what he might find, and fear of what could happen next. He wasn't ready for this, but he had no other choice. The only way to end this nightmare was to expose everything. As they approached the mansion, the place that had once seemed like a symbol of wealth and success, Alex's heart began to race. This was the headquarters of the conspiracy. This was where it all began, and where it would end. He couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding as he walked up the steps, the large imposing doors looming in front of him. Mitchell gave Alex a reassuring look. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. "We're in this together." The door creaked open, and Alex was immediately struck by the cold, sterile atmosphere inside. It was too quiet. It was too calm. The kind of calm that always preceded chaos. Then out of the shadows a figure appeared. Alex's blood ran cold as he recognized the person standing in front of him. It was someone he never thought he would see again. "Alex," the figure said with a chilling smile, "I'm glad you could make it." It was Mr. Cooper, one of the town's wealthiest businessmen. He had always been friendly to Alex, a kind of mentor figure who had offered advice and support when Alex needed it most. But now, standing there in the dim light, Mr. Cooper's true nature became all too clear. He was the mastermind, the one who had orchestrated everything, the robberies, the false accusations, the cover-ups. "Why?" Alex managed to choke out. "Why did you do this?" Mr. Cooper's smile faded, and he took a slow step toward Alex. "Because, Alex," he said softly, "the world isn't as simple as you think. People like you don't belong at the top, but now you do, and you'll help me keep it that way." The realization hit Alex like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about a robbery, this was about power, and Mr. Cooper would stop at nothing to maintain his grip on it. As Alex stood there, facing the person who had orchestrated his pain and humiliation, he knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. It couldn't be.